Hi, I'm Mark. This is Teacher Talk, and in this video I'm going to give 10 tips for doing an EPQ, Extended Project Qualification. So obviously these tips can be used if you're a student doing an EPQ, but also if you're a teacher or a school leader implementing it in school, then this is also useful for you as well. My background is I introduced OCR EPQ into a school for all Year 12s back in 2017, and since then I've moderated hundreds and hundreds of EPQ projects for OCR, and so I've seen patterns of what makes good and bad EPQ projects from individual students and within schools and colleges. So I should make it clear that I've only worked on the OCR EPQ, so I'm less familiar with AQA, but it is the case that the assessment criteria are very similar for two, as I'll mention later on. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, really quickly, what is EPQ? It stands for Extended Project Qualification. Unlike A-levels or other qualifications, it's totally up to you what you're going to learn about, what skills you're going to develop, what project you're going to do. So a lot of the time it's a 5,000 word dissertation, but it doesn't have to be that. It can also be an artifact that you create or an event that you put on. In terms of UCAS points, it's worth exactly half an A-level. So if you get an A-star, for example, that's 28 UCAS points, whereas an A-star and A-level is 56 UCAS points. Okay, right, so let's get into 10 tips for the EPQ. All right, tip one, very simple. Try as hard as you can to make sure you love the project you are going to be working on. Obviously, that will increase your motivation and how much you're enjoying it, and it'll help you keep going and also help you get going early on it. So a simple test for this is you want to choose something that you are looking forward to the time when you're going to be working on it, rather than dreading it or seeing it as a kind of chore that you might sometimes see your homework as. So try and pick something that you really love doing and you're looking forward to getting on with. Tip two, this is not something you have to do, but I really do recommend it. Try and make your project something real that people are actually going to use. Now, it's quite hard to do that if you're doing a dissertation. Essentially, if you do that, it's just going to be something that your teachers and examiners or moderators are going to read. That is fine, but a great way to look at the EPQ is to try and make something that is actually going to be of use in the real world. Things that I've seen, examples of this, for example, a student making a guide for young children to cope with bereavements, a case study on dementia for the benefit of doctors to look at. I've seen one student write a short novella and print it up. Now those things are things that can extend beyond just you and your teacher and examiner, that you're actually going to put out into the real world. That is a great way to help you focus on what you're doing, to feel like it's meaningful, and to help you put loads of energy and passion into it. Tip three, this might sound like a bit of a silly one, but I've seen hundreds of projects and you do see some ideas come up quite a lot. And I'm just going to give you one that I've seen a lot and it's really hard to be impressed by it, which is serial killers, is it nature or nurture? I can't tell you how many times I've seen that one. I basically advise you not to do it for a couple of reasons. One is that you can't really actually answer that question in a 5,000 word dissertation. You just end up making a project which is here's loads of information about a few serial killers and whether it's nature or nurture, and you can't get a general answer. There is a more serious general point here, which is make your topic narrow and specific enough that you can actually give it a go in 5,000 words. Most students start off with really, really vast, big topics. Basically, the narrower the topic, the more realistically achievable it is in a 5,000 word dissertation. Okay, next tip. This is an obvious one. You'll know I'm right as soon as I say it, which is that you want to get stuck into this early on and ingrain it into your weekly habits, or monthly habits at least. You really don't want to be leaving everything towards the end. I can tell you as a moderator, it is obvious when students are doing that. Students might be able to produce the word count, etc., and the documentation you need, but it is clear when they've rushed it at the end. This goes back to tip one. The best way to make sure you're working on this regularly every week or whatever is make sure it's a project you're really into and you're really passionate about. Tip five is a simple one, is Google these words: OCR, EPQ, URS. I say these words, those 9 letters, and you will find on Google the OCR unit recording sheet. Why should you do this? Because this is exactly the document that your teachers and then moderators will use to give you a mark. So basically it tells you exactly how to get a top bound project. it's quite a long document, but a shortcut is just read the band 4 stuff in the right-hand column. That tells you what a top-level project should look like. Okay, the next few tips are going to be about each of the assessment objectives. There are 4 of those, both for OCR and AQA. The first one is about management of the project, or another way to look at that is about the planning of it. With all of the assessment objectives, you want to make sure you've got documentation and evidence. So the more evidence, the more paperwork and things you put into your submitted project, the better. Okay, so what does that mean, first of all, with management? So you need to show that you have planned this project all the way through. Now, that's going to start with show evidence that you have considered different options. As with all bits of advice here, you want to do this not in a tokenistic way, but show me that you really have considered different options and you really have thought about strengths and weaknesses of different ideas you've had before selecting one. Think about what skills you're going to develop through this, how it relates to your existing studies. Now, it's up to you how you evidence this. Be creative. Show us a way you want to do this which suits you best. So that can include mind maps. It can just include any type of notes you want to. There is no prescription on that, but just show us that you really thought about it. That's an initial stage of AO1. Throughout the project, do absolutely keep a log and a journal. Write about your experiences, write about what you've tried, write about what you're developing. If something goes wrong, that is fine. Tell us about it. Tell us how you responded to it. You will get credit for that. The classic planning document for AO1 that a lot of schools use is a Gantt chart. That's okay. You can use it if you want to. Again, as with all things, it's obvious when schools are just doing this, students are doing this in a tokenistic way. They're just putting together a Gantt chart that they obviously never really used. Okay, so do use a Gantt chart if it is really actually useful to you. Do not put it in there just to show it to the examiners. Try and show that it's a document you've actually used and has really helped you to plan. You don't have to use a Gantt chart. You can go online for any planning software. That's it. That looks impressive if you show us some software we don't know about. So take some time to work out what planning software or strategy you want to use. And that will also relate to skills you develop in the project, which is another assessment objective coming up. All right, I think we're on tip 7 here, aren't we? And this is research or AO2 assessment objective 2. Okay, first of all, read a lot, or you can include, watch a lot. There's a lot of great stuff, of course, on YouTube, especially if you're developing a skill. Absorb loads and loads of content. Again, it goes back to tip 1. Choose something you're really into and you really want to find out about. Okay, so read a lot or watch a lot. Record what you've read or watched and make sure you analyze it. So you should have a system for analyzing it. Again, this is up to you. You can choose it. I'm just going to give you 2 acronyms you could use. One is CRAAP. You can figure out what word that stands for. And another one is PROMPT. I will put links in the descriptions below for you to Google those. You can use those, but anything where you're showing us that you really have thought about and analysed your sources is great for AO2. You should be showing us that you've looked at quite a lot of resources. You should also show they really have helped you develop skills and have helped you realise your project. Another tip some students do, which helps, is they put in photocopies of entire articles they have looked at, and they show us how they've annotated it, whether that's highlighting or writing notes over the top of it. That's great. You don't have to do that for every single one you do, but if you show us some examples of your annotation and highlighting, it shows us your research skills. Do remember that research is part of the skills you are going to be developing as part of the EPQ. Your ability to use things like JSTOR or OneSearch or MyBib, whatever it is, flag that up in your mind as, okay, that's a skill I didn't have when I started and I do have at the end. That will help you with AO4, which we'll come on to in a minute. AO3 for OCR is called Develop and Realise. Now, in a way, this one takes care of itself as long as you're doing everything else right. So is it a project you have got obvious passion for? Have you executed it well? Have you developed skills along the way? Well, if you're doing everything else right and you've produced a great project, AO3 will take care of itself. So in a way, you want to focus more on documenting AO1, AO2 and AO4, as well as showing us what your final product is, and that AO3 should take care of itself. Okay, next tip, which is about assessment objective 4, which is where you review and reflect. Okay, so the first thing to note about this is you finish the project and then you do this stuff. You can't do this as you're going along. Second point is I see a lot of presentations here where there's a long description of what the students did and then a little bit of reflection. Look, this assessment objective is much more about your reflection skills. So if you are doing a presentation for AO4, where you have to present in some way, focus much more on the reflection than on the description. The description will be in your log, it'll be in the project itself. So what we really want to see is in-depth reflection on what you have actually done. Right, as a very, very useful tip here is to audit your skills. So it's a great idea to identify a list of skills at the beginning of the project and kind of record where you are with these skills. And then at the end of the project, review the same thing and track some kind of progress. Again, it's totally open how you want to do that, how you want to record it. But that is a great idea. That's a really good way to show AO4 skills. Be as specific as you can. For example, don't just say, well, I've improved my research skills. Well, tell us what exactly did you mean? So what have you learned to do? So I learned to use JSTOR. I learned to use keyword searches. I learned to use these filters, etc. Those types of detail are great. Connect it to what you want to do in the future. I mean, the one I've just described, that's obviously really useful for being a university student afterwards. You can do a PowerPoint, that's fine. But if you want to do something more creative, that's great. You could use maybe a Prezi instead. You can also do exhibition stalls. That's something for your school to obviously to decide on whether they want to do that. Some students film their presentations, which is great, and that can be shared with moderators, but it's not absolutely necessary. All right, the fact is, I thought I had 10 tips, but I've only got 9, so I'm scrambling around for a 10th one now. Well, let me just mention the last point, which is that you want to decide how it fits into your studies. For a lot of students, you'll be doing A-levels. You cannot repeat something you're doing in physics or English A-level, but you can extend it. And that's actually can be a good idea because you need to say as part of the project how it's going to connect to what you want to do later on, which of course might be connected to your A-levels. Okay, so those are my tips on the EPQ. It really is a great thing for schools and colleges to offer students, give students a lot more autonomy over what they're learning than any A-level does. It's a great thing to have in school. Can be integrated as part of the wider school community, and younger students in the school can see what the students are getting up to, so that's a great aspect of it. So I really do think it's a great thing to get involved in. If you think there are any other tips that I've missed, please do drop them in some comments below. I'd really appreciate any likes or subscribes to this channel as well. Thanks very much for watching.
Soundstripe.